Hello, my name is Kyra Jackson.
And I'm Dean Jackson.
And this is Vistas and Vittles. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be talking about scouting trips.
What is a scouting trip and why is it helpful?
The first time I ever heard about a scouting trip, I was watching a YouTube produced by a lady named Krishan Wright. And Krishan Wright is in charge of a group called Blacksit Global. And she was talking about doing a scouting trip. I didn't know what one was. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today.
So first off, what is a scouting trip? If you are intending to move really anywhere, but for us, especially moving to Portugal, it's important to know where you're going to be, where you want to live, and the pros and cons of that area. Now, you can do this remotely, but it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. And we found that having our feet on the ground in the place made for the best experience and also the best outcome.
So first thing we did when we had made the decision to move to Portugal was we started looking at places that we thought we could live. We knew we didn't want to be down south in the Algarve area where it has a tendency to be really, really hot more often. We wanted a little bit more moderate climate. We were living in Northern California, so very similar weather in Northern California, Portland, the Pacific Northwest, that kind of thing. Go ahead.
And we also wanted a place that was walkable. While our scouting trip did include Lisbon, Lisbon was, we knew from the outset, probably not going to be the place for us. We were also visiting friends there. We wanted a smaller city that was more walkable. So Kyra was able to do some research about different cities to visit that fell into our criterion. The climates, the location. We wanted to be close enough to an airport so that we didn't have to travel all day to get there. Mm-hmm. The walkability of the city and the heritage. We wanted something a bit artsy.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that you'll need to do is decide how long you want your trip to be. What we did was we planned ahead and we were able to take a month to do our trip. And so we knew we'd be staying in a couple of different cities and checking those out. So what you'll need to do is decide exactly, if you're going to a country, what cities are you thinking about within that country? And then make a plan to get from place to place within that country. We're really lucky in that when we were doing our trips, everything was accessible either by bus or train, and it was very easy for us to get and negotiate going from place to place, dragging our suitcases because we had one suitcase each at that point.
And another thing to consider is, do you want to be in a place where you're very likely to find that most of the locals speak English, or like us, you want to be in a place that challenges you to learn the language, because while a lot of people do speak English, not everybody does. Mm-hmm. And we're lucky in that we have some friends who run restaurants who've made it their mission in life to teach us the language. So we're not allowed to speak English when we go there.
And I did mention this earlier, but I want to also throw it in again about the weather. Really take into consideration what is your happy weather, because for some people they're only going to be happy if it's super hot and they can go to the beach every day and sit there and read a book, and for other people they want it to be a little cooler and a little bit manageable. Their perfect temperature is about 70 degrees. And so when you're making these decisions about going wherever you're going, make sure that you are thinking about what you picture in your mind as your ideal place that you wanted to retire to, but also how does it match up with your dream retirement? Because you're going to have to marry your absolute perfect dream with your maybe not so perfect reality, depending on where you end up.
And I want to just talk a little bit more about the weather. What we did when we came here is we traveled at a time of year where it was not all sunny. We traveled during the winter because we wanted to see if where we were was comfortable for us during the winter. And it would be the same thing if you were moving to the Algarve. Consider going there in the heat of summer to see if it's something that you can really enjoy and live with, because if it's 100 degrees for 20 days in a row, maybe that's not the place.
And I think this applies to anywhere you're going. For instance, if you're thinking about moving to Paris, it rains a lot in Paris. And so are you prepared for months and months of rain? The French have a saying, I hate the rain. And so how many months of rain back to back can you handle? Something to think about.
Mm-hmm. So when we came here, we were fortunate enough on the first night in the town where we ended up living, there was an expat meetup. And we got to know some of the expats who very quickly became our friends, who live in the area. So they were able to show us the ropes of, nice places to eat, where to eat like a local. They were able to help us to navigate simple things like getting our power turned on when we got our apartment, dealing with the appropriate authorities. They just gave us advice. So I would strongly recommend, if possible, that when you arrive in the place that you're really considering moving to, that you get right in with the expat community, because that community is going to be there to help you when you need help. That's not to say that you shouldn't become friends with the locals. That's really been a goal of ours as well. But the expats, at least in our experience, they have our back.
Yes, and there are always things that need to be negotiated that you may not think about. I need to call the telephone company. Well, when you're in the United States, you know how to call up the telephone company and talk to them and explain everything. But all of a sudden, you're in a foreign country and it's almost like, okay, I don't maybe fully speak, I speak enough Portuguese to get by. Do I speak telephone Portuguese, like to get my telephone set up or to get my cable set up? And so a lot of times people can tell you, oh, well, what you do is you call the number, for instance, you call the number and they'll say, oh, you hit 5, and then you always get an English speaking person. Well, that might not be something that your Portuguese friend knows, but your American friend or your Canadian friend, your Pakistani friend, whoever has moved here and has been negotiating that already knows the number if they've been negotiating things in English. So those kinds of things are really helpful.
Another thing that we would encourage you to do, if you have, like we were fortunate enough to have a month in the country to really explore and live here. And we really decided that we wanted to live like locals, within reason, obviously, because we didn't speak the language, but rather than live like tourists. So what that meant for us was that we, instead of having a hotel or an Airbnb, instead of having a hotel, we had an Airbnb, which had a kitchen. We went shopping at the markets. We got to learn how to shop in the language. We cooked. We kept track of how much things cost, because it's going to be much more expensive if you're living the tourist life than if you're living the local life. And we got to learn what some of the products were here that would substitute for products that were not available that we were used to in the United States. So all told, that enabled us to really get a grasp on just living here and walking to places, going shopping daily at the markets, just kind of a slow down and live the life at the pace that you will be living the life.
And one of the other things that I want to recommend that we did as well, we kind of went aisle to aisle in the different stores that we went to. Dean said to see what was available, and that was super helpful. Also, to look at the prices of what you're going to be paying for things. You realistically know what you eat on a regular basis, and so you can sort of budget based on knowing, okay, what is the price of a steak, or what is the price of a rotisserie chicken, because normally we'll get a rotisserie chicken and a salad. Can we get that here? How much is that going to cost? What's that like? And so it gives you an opportunity to do that. I also made sure that I bought prescriptions and had a prescription filled here, so I had some idea of what that was going to cost as well. And number one, did they have it available? They do have something here called compounding pharmacies. So if you have a medication in Portugal that isn't readily available, then it might have to go to a compound pharmacy. And what a lot of people do here, because we're like an hour away, is they have the prescription at the compound pharmacy. They'll call up and say, hey, I need, it filled, and they'll have it shipped to them. Or you can go down to Lisbon, and maybe you're visiting friends down there, and you can get it filled down there. But these are some things that it's good to figure out in advance, just so you can kind of map out what you're going to do when you finally are living in the country.
Right. We're going to do another episode that really deals with the medical system here. Not exactly sure when we're going to put that one out, but it's going to deal with pricing. It's going to deal with our experiences. But it's good to know that if you have a medication and you bring the bottle and you're going to run out, it is likely that there will be something that they can give you. And in our experience, they refill the prescription just based upon what was on the bottle, not a doctor's prescription here. So the pharmacies here are good at helping people from other countries, and good at keeping you in the medicine that you need, and consider that in case of an emergency.
One of the things that we were talking about also is when you're touring a place, you're going to go to all the museums, you're going to probably do like a hop on, hop off bus, you're going to eat at all the fancy restaurants. And a lot of times that's how many of us fall in love with a city. But when you're actually living there on a day-to-day basis, you're not always going to go to the museum. You're not always going to take the hop on, hop off bus and do 3 or 4 museums in one day. So it's hard when you're doing that to get a realistic view of what your finances might be, and how often you'll be able to do those extra things that you do like to do. Now, these days, what we do is we'll plan to go to a museum, or we plan to go out, and just kind of work that into our regular budget. And if you stay all the way towards the end, we do have, all the way to the end of our video, we do have some things that we'll be talking to you about as far as what some of our upcoming things are. And we'll be letting you in on those little secrets.
And eating in the spaces that the locals eat, I think, is very important. Because you get some really good food. You could go to a Pizza Hut; they do exist, but if you find the places where the locals eat, not only do you get good food, but you get good food very affordably. We have a place that we frequent, and they have something here called the Prato do Dia, the plate of the day. If you get a full plate of the day, say chicken, rice, and salad, it would be about €4.50. Half of one of those, and they do serve them in half plates, mayo prato do dia.
Half the plate.
It can be as little as €3. So we have been known to sit down for a really nice lunch. The two of us each had a glass of wine, and it was less than €7.
So for your lunch, less than €10. So it makes it really easy when you're eating in the local places to go out and live that lifestyle that you always dreamed that you were living, and you've just had like an amazing meal as well. We have a tendency to cook at home a lot because the town that we live in, it is called Caldes de Reina. There is something called the Pracia da Fruta. And basically, it is a 362 day a year market. And we literally walk up an alley and we are pretty much there. And that's where we do a lot of our shopping for onions, garlic, tomatoes. I've got like one vendor that I go to for my salad and for my favorite lettuce, and they always end up also giving me free coriander or cilantro and parsley whenever I shop there.
Yeah, the Praça de Fruta, it's an almost all year round farmers market. The food there is fresh. It's usually much less expensive than you would find even in the supermarkets here. And in the supermarkets here, it's not too expensive, the vegetables, but the vegetables there are fresher and just much less expensive.
And you can pretty much find anything you're looking for on Saturdays and Sundays. The market gets even bigger. And so you'll have the honey vendor, the sausage vendor, the bread vendor. And it's amazing. You always end up running in. We always run into somebody we know if we go out there and we go shopping. And then towards the end of the Pracia, there's this wonderful little coffee shop. Dean loves the coffee up there. He says he's a coffee snob, and it's like his favorite place to have coffee. And we always end up running into friends there, but it's just a really lovely area in town.
And the reason that we're talking about that, A, we love it, but also in the town that you choose, there might very well be something like that for you. If it's not a farmer's market, it might be a park. If it's not a park, it might be a lake. Or a special coffee shop or a special place to spend time. I think that that's very important to find in the place where you want to live, the place that's special to you, that you'll keep revisiting, that you'll tell all your friends about, because that is one thing that really makes living the expat lifestyle special. It's not only having a town or a city that you love, but having those little special spots that you love for whatever reason. One of the things that we really wanted to talk to you about this time is housing. Because for us, getting a visa in Portugal, one thing that you have to have before you ever have any of your appointments is you have to have a place to live.
Yes, you do.
And you will not get your visa if you do not either own a place or have a lease in place. We know of people who have leased apartments sight unseen, and that's okay. A lot of people do it. For us, we felt that it was important for us to find a place and walk through it and see it. And for us, that also meant that we had to actually come to town. We settled in Caldes de Reina, and we knocked on the doors of a few real estate agents until we found one that had listings for rent, because we did not want to buy just yet. A lot of people do, and if you find your ideal place and want to buy, great. Yay. For us, we wanted to have the freedom to maybe explore other areas. So we found a real estate agent who's great, and they took us to a few places that were up for rent. But one of the first places that we saw happened to be really well within our price range, happened to be right on a park, and happened to be a good amount of space. So in order to make sure that we had our lease in place before our visa appointment, we snapped up this apartment.
Now, we had been given advice previously. My friend Amy, who also lives in Portugal but lives in a different city, had told me before, like, don't wait for the perfect apartment to come up. If it looks like you could possibly live there, take it. And that was very good advice, because we did take the first place that we looked at. And we have been happy here. It's a great location. We will talk about some of the, ins and outs, because we are going to do a whole day that we do a tape on renting, a whole little video on that, because
there are pros and cons of the apartments and the types of apartments you might find. But it's very important to get an apartment. So my advice would be to get your feet on the ground where you want to go, find an apartment. They go quickly, so make a decision quickly. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Get your dream underway and get that apartment. You can always move later. Just make sure that it's someplace that you actually want to live.
And we do recommend finding your apartment with your scouting trip if that's at all possible. The other thing is you are probably going to find a place that's going to be closer to the amount of rent that you dreamed about paying. If you are physically on the ground and you can walk into that agency and say, hey, you know, what is this place? Because we'll talk a little bit more about all of that, but you'll be able to find just places with prices that are lower than what you may have seen advertised on Idealista. Number one, Idealista does, which is where everybody looks for apartments, doesn't cover every single, there's no, what do they call it, a central MLS here in Portugal. Each agency has a different batch of apartments. So sometimes you just want to walk by and look and see what apartments they have that are available. And you may see a lot of things that are not on Idealista because for whatever reason, they just haven't listed it.
And we are talking a lot about apartments because that's been our experience. But we had a choice of a couple of different spaces that we could rent for the same price. We had the apartment that we ended up in, which is a 3-bedroom, about the equivalent of 1,400 square feet in the US. But we could have gotten a larger house for the same rent, but farther away from the center of town. So,
and we really wanted to be in the center of town, but we'll go through that in the renting video. But our next couple of videos that are going to be coming up, we're going to do one on renting. We're going to do one on some medical costs. We're going to talk about our specific situation here as far as waiting for our resident cards and things like that, you know, different things that can come up. And then we're also going to do one on all the mistakes that we've made and, you know, different things that we were like, oh, we could have done that differently. So that you don't have to make the same mistakes.
And we're going to do that one a little bit later because we're probably going to make some more mistakes.
Yeah, we're probably going to, you know, come up with a few other things between now and then.
So if you liked this video, please like it and subscribe to our channel and keep your eyes open for future videos. We plan on dropping videos on Wednesdays and on Sundays.
Mm-hmm. And once again, we are Vistas and Vittles, and we hope that you enjoyed this week's installment. Have a great rest of your day, and see you out on the road.